The operation is over. Epic Fury, we're done with that stage of it. Those are the words of U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, signaling a sudden, almost jarring halt to a major American military offensive against Iran. Imagine being in a movie theater where the sound suddenly cuts out right at the absolute climax. That is exactly where we find ourselves today. Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're unpacking a geopolitical thriller that is playing out in real time on the global stage. We're looking at the sudden, unexpected pause of Project Freedom, a high-stakes standoff in the Middle East, and the massive international shockwaves that are following right behind it. Let's dive in, because the sheer scale of this bottleneck is absolutely wild. So here is the central paradox we are currently navigating. On one hand, the US has paused Project Freedom, literally hitting the brakes on a major military operation to supposedly give some breathing room for peace talks. But look at the flip side. The US blockade of Iranian ports is still going full throttle. It's a classic cinematic split screen, diplomatic handshakes happening in the light, while a brutal economic chokehold is maintained in the dark. Now, to understand this sudden plot twist, we really have to look at the official statements. US President Donald Trump announced that, yes, while the blockade remains, the pause on Project Freedom is just temporary. But the real kicker here, the surprise cameo, if you will, is that this wasn't just born out of bilateral talks. It actually came partly at the request of Pakistan. It highlights this desperate, behind-the-scenes scramble by surrounding nations to defuse this powder keg before the whole thing blows. Act 2, the Global Board. While all the headlines are naturally focused on Washington and Tehran, the shockwaves are literally shaking the entire globe. Enter Project Freedom. This is the U.S. military's direct effort to escort stranded commercial ships out of the highly contested Strait of Hormuz. Think about it. For a waterway that controls a massive percentage of the planet's energy supply, stranded ships mean the global economy is effectively being held hostage. It is the ultimate geopolitical bottleneck. Which brings us to a huge question. Why is the U.S. taking the lead role here? Well, Secretary of State Marco Rubio addressed this head-on. He stated that the primary responsibility falls on the United States simply because they're the only country capable of actually projecting power in that region. He even described the operation as a favor to the world. So it's not about a lack of global appetite for open waters, it's a sheer lack of naval capability. The U.S. argues they are the only ones with the speed and power to pull a rescue like this off. And this dynamic shifts our spotlight further east. While Washington pauses its military operations, Iranian media reports that their foreign minister, Abbas Araghchi, arrived in Beijing to meet his Chinese counterpart, Wang Yi. The U.S. is actively hoping Beijing will pressure Tehran to release its grip on the strait. Why? Because as Rubio pointed out, China's massive export-driven economy is deeply, deeply vulnerable to and dependent on shipments moving through Hormuz. It is absolutely in China's direct interest that the strait reopens. Act 3, the fog of war. Now, despite all the diplomatic maneuvering happening in Washington and Beijing, the reality out on the water paints a much, much more dangerous picture. The term pause makes it sound calm, right? Well, U.S. military escorts under Project Freedom actively drew Iranian attacks over the last 36 hours. Epic Fury may technically be over, but make no mistake, this is an incredibly fragile ceasefire where a single miscalculation could reignite a massive conflict. The rules of engagement out there right now are razor thin. Iran's Revolutionary Guards Navy has issued a very stark warning. A firm response awaits any ships that deviate from the route approved by Tehran. This is a direct face-to-face battle over who actually dictates the terms of passage, and it's keeping the water at an absolute boiling point. Right in the midst of this, we hit the true fog of war. It's like a tense, he-said-she-said thriller dynamic. On one side, the United Arab Emirates reports intercepting a barrage of missiles and drones from Iran for a second consecutive day. On the other side, Tehran categorically denies launching any such strikes. It's a stark, totally irreconcilable contrast that really highlights the deep informational chaos surrounding this conflict. To underline that denial, Iran's Qatam al-Anbiya Command released a direct statement saying their armed forces did not launch any missile or drone operation, period. So when you have high-tech missiles allegedly flying through the air and official military channels releasing total denials, it creates a deeply unstable environment where the truth is incredibly difficult to verify in real time. But perhaps the most chilling detail in this whole script comes from Iran's chief negotiator. Following a spate of attacks in the trade route, the negotiator stated that Tehran had not even started yet. I mean, wow. That is a stark reminder that despite ongoing talks of a final settlement and a paused military operation from the U.S., the threat of severe escalation is looming right beneath the surface. So what happens next? How does the world step back from the brink here? Well, for this temporary pause to actually transform into a permanent ceasefire, the United States has laid out some incredibly strict conditions. Iran must agree to President Trump's demands on its nuclear program, and they must fully reopen the Strait of Hormuz. For Washington, these aren't just talking points. These are massive, non-negotiable pillars. Which leaves us staring down the ultimate cliffhanger. Will this fragile, Pakistan-requested pause actually lead to a complete and final agreement? Or, with ports still blockaded, missiles allegedly flying over the UAE, and strict demands on the table, is this global chokehold just the opening scene? The stakes literally could not be higher. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep your eyes on the Strait of Hormuz, and as always, keep seeking the facts.